and I was born to rock. Yeah. Want everybody in to turn your head.
When Elvis Presley spotted a young woman crying in the crowd, he did something no one expected. He pulled her up on stage. But what happened next silenced the entire arena. Her trembling words left the king of rock and roll speechless and in tears. Who was this lady, and what did she say that broke Elvis's heart that night? The night that changed everything. It was 1972 in Las Vegas. The king was at the height of his fame. His voice could melt hearts, his presence could command a room, and his shows always sold out. That evening, the concert hall of the Hilton International Hotel was packed to the brim. Thousands of fans waving programs, holding cameras, people dressed in their best clothes, whispering and laughing, waited for the one man everyone had come to see, Elvis Presley. When the lights dimmed, the crowd roared. Then came the sound, that familiar opening note of Suspicious Minds. The stage lit up, and there he was. Elvis in a shining white jumpsuit with gold details, his hair perfectly styled, his smile wide and full of energy. He picked up his microphone and gave that half grin that made everyone scream even louder. "Good evening, Las Vegas," he said with a laugh, his southern accent smooth and charming. The audience went wild. The band started, the music filled the hall, and for the next half hour, Elvis owned the stage. He moved like no one else, hips swaying, hands snapping, every gesture full of confidence and rhythm. People sang along, danced in their seats, and some even cried just watching him. But somewhere near the middle of the hall, one woman wasn't singing or dancing. She was standing quietly, hands pressed to her chest, tears rolling down her face. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, dressed simply in a light blue dress. Her eyes, red from crying, stayed fixed on Elvis like he was the only person in the world. Elvis noticed her. At first he kept singing, but his gaze returned to her again and again. Between verses, he saw her wipe her eyes, trying to hide her tears. Something about her sadness caught him off guard. He had seen thousands of faces in the crowd before, screaming, smiling, cheering, but never someone crying like that. During a pause between songs, Elvis lowered his microphone and leaned forward. "Hey, honey," he said gently, pointing in her direction. "Are you all right?" The crowd turned their heads, following his gaze. The girl froze. She shook her head slightly, trying to disappear into her seat, but it was too late. The king had spoken to her. Elvis gave a kind smile. "Come on, sweetheart," he said softly. "Come up here for a second." The room fell silent. The band stopped playing. All that could be heard was the faint hum of the speakers and the girl's soft steps as she slowly made her way toward the stage. Security guards helped her through the crowd. Her hands were trembling. People whispered and smiled. Some even clapped. She looked frightened, overwhelmed, but Elvis waited patiently, holding out his hand as she climbed the small steps to the stage. When she finally reached him, she stood there frozen. Elvis smiled and the crowd cheered in encouragement. He leaned down slightly and said something that the microphone barely caught. "It's all right, darling. You're safe up here." The girl smiled nervously, still shaking. Elvis handed her the microphone. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice soft but clear. The girl's lips parted, but no words came at first. She took a shaky breath and whispered something the microphone didn't pick up. Elvis leaned closer. "Sarah," she said at last, her voice trembling. "Well, Sarah," Elvis said warmly, "I'm mighty glad you came tonight." He smiled, trying to put her at ease. "But tell me, what's making you cry like that?" The question hung in the air. Everyone in the audience leaned forward. The spotlight fell on her face and tears sparkled on her cheeks. She gripped the microphone tightly, her hands trembling even more. I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered. Elvis blinked, unsure what she meant. "Thank me? For what, honey?" The girl hesitated, her voice cracked. "For your music. It saved me," she said softly. A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Elvis didn't speak. He just looked at her, really looked. Something deep inside him shifted. Maybe it was the honesty in her tone, or the pain hiding behind her fragile smile. Whatever it was, the room no longer felt like a concert. It felt like a confession. Elvis nodded gently. "You don't have to thank me, darling," he said, his voice low. "I'm just singing songs." But Sarah shook her head. "No, it's more than songs," she said, her eyes glistening. When I was at my lowest, your voice was the only thing that made me feel alive again." The audience went silent. Even the band stood frozen. Elvis lowered his microphone, his face softening. The warmth, the pride, the sparkle, it all gave way to something more human. He reached out and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The cameras flashed. A few people in the audience wiped their eyes. No one moved, no one shouted. For a moment, Las Vegas itself seemed to stand still. Elvis smiled faintly and said, "Thank you, sweetheart. You just gave me the best gift a man could get." Then he looked out over the crowd, still holding Sarah's hand. "This one's for her," he said quietly as the band began to play again. The lights dimmed and the music swelled, but everyone knew that something truly rare had just happened on that stage. A man, a legend, and a fan, connected not by fame, but by pure human emotion. That was the night that changed everything. The girl no one knew. After that night, people couldn't stop talking about the girl. Fans who were there described her as the crying girl in blue. Some said she looked like an angel who had wandered into the lights. Others said there was something haunting in her eyes, like she had lived through more pain than anyone her age should, but no one knew her name. Not really. To the crowd, she was just a mystery. Back inside, backstage was still busy. Elvis was getting ready for the next set of shows, but he couldn't shake the image of the girl. The way she trembled as she spoke, the honesty in her eyes, the sound of her voice saying, "Your music saved me." To him, it wasn't just another fan moment. It was real, deeply real. Her name was Sarah. She had come to Las Vegas from a small town in Tennessee. It was her first time leaving home alone. Her ticket had been a gift, a birthday surprise from her older brother before he passed away. Elvis had been their shared love since childhood. They grew up singing his songs on the porch, pretending to be on stage with broomsticks as microphones. When her brother died in a car accident the year before, everything in her world stopped. She stopped singing. She stopped laughing. She barely spoke to anyone. Her days became quiet, empty spaces filled with memories too heavy to carry. But at night, she'd play Elvis records. "Can't Help Falling in Love," "Love Me Tender," "You'll Never Walk Alone." Somehow those songs held her together. They made her believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still beauty left in the world. So when she learned Elvis was performing in Las Vegas, she saved every bit of money she had, working at a small diner, taking extra shifts, until she could buy a ticket. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She just packed her brother's old denim jacket, her blue dress, and the ticket that would take her to see the man whose music had helped her survive. That night, she sat near the middle of the hall, surrounded by strangers. As the lights dimmed and the music began, she felt something stir inside her. It wasn't just excitement. It was relief, like she had finally come full circle, back to the one thing that made her feel close to her brother again. When Elvis sang, "You Are Always on My Mind," she broke. The tears came fast, uncontrollable, and she couldn't hide them. Every word, every note, carried her back to moments she thought she had lost forever. And that's when he saw her. In her mind, it didn't seem real. The lights, the cameras, the sound of his voice calling out to her. When Elvis asked her to come on stage, she thought it was a dream. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. The walk from her seat to the stage felt endless. The spotlight was blinding. The crowd disappeared. There was only Elvis standing there, his eyes soft with concern. She wanted to speak, but the words got stuck in her throat. She didn't want to cry, not in front of him, not in front of everyone, but her heart couldn't help it. When she finally said her name, Sarah, he smiled as if he already knew her somehow. His voice, so calm, so gentle, gave her courage. And when he asked why she was crying, she told him, not everything, but enough. Enough for him to understand that his music had done something powerful, something he never realized it could do. The moment only lasted a few minutes, but for her, it felt timeless. When he hugged her, she felt something lift inside her. It wasn't the grief disappearing, it was something softer, forgiveness maybe, a bit of peace. After she returned to her seat, the concert continued, but she barely heard the songs. She just watched him, the king, singing with tears still shining in his eyes, and for the first time since her brother's death, she smiled. Later that night, back in her small hotel room, she replayed everything in her mind. She touched the stage pass that security had given her and held it close to her heart. It smelled faintly of cologne and stage lights, the scent of a moment she knew would stay with her forever. No one outside that concert would ever fully understand what happened between them on that stage. It wasn't about fame or music. It was about pain meeting kindness, about one broken heart finding comfort in another. Sarah didn't want attention. She didn't tell her story to the newspapers or reporters waiting outside the venue. She didn't even tell her friends back home. To her, that night was private, sacred. But for Elvis, the memory stayed too. Something about that fragile girl in blue stirred something deep in him. As the show ended and he walked backstage, he knew one thing for sure. He would never forget the way her voice trembled when she said, "Your music saved me." And maybe, just maybe that night, she saved a part of him too. A heartfelt confession. The next night, Elvis returned to the stage, but something inside him had changed. He still smiled, still performed with the same passion that made crowds scream his name, but there was a new heaviness in his eyes, something softer, quieter. The image of Sarah, the girl in blue, hadn't left his mind. He kept thinking about her trembling voice, her words echoing in his heart, "Your music saved me." To Elvis, those words meant more than the applause, more than the fame. He had sung to millions, but for the first time, he truly felt what his music could do, how it could reach a broken soul and hold it together. But for Sarah, that moment on stage was still fresh in her mind too. The next morning, she woke up before sunrise, sitting by the hotel window with the city lights fading in the distance. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing there, tears glistening in the stage lights. She could still feel his hand on her shoulder, warm, steady, kind. She had never planned to say anything that night. She just wanted to see him sing, to feel close to her brother again. But when he called her on stage, the emotions came rushing out, and before she knew it, she had told him everything her heart had carried in silence. That confession, spoken in front of thousands of strangers, was something she had never shared with anyone. The truth was, after her brother died, she had almost given up. There were nights she couldn't bear the quiet of her room, nights when she sat in the dark, listening to Elvis's records on repeat, trying to find a reason to keep living. His voice became that reason. When she said, "Your music saved me," it wasn't a figure of speech. It was the truth. His music had carried her through her darkest days. Back in the concert hall, that truth had reached Elvis like a wave. He had heard fans thank him before, for autographs, for songs, for memories, but never like this. There was something pure in her voice, something that stripped away the glamour and the noise. It reminded him that behind every stage light and flashing camera, there were real people whose lives he had touched without ever knowing it. That realization hit him deeply. After the show, Elvis sat in his dressing room, still wearing his stage outfit. The noise of the crowd outside had faded, replaced by the soft hum of the air conditioner and the muffled chatter of his crew. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, at the man behind the makeup and glitter. For the first time in a long while, he didn't see the king. He just saw himself, a man trying to make sense of his purpose. He picked up his guitar, strummed a few quiet notes, and thought of Sarah. The sound of her voice replayed in his mind, trembling but full of truth. He whispered softly to himself, "Maybe she's the reason I still do this." Meanwhile, Sarah was sitting on her hotel bed, holding the concert ticket in her hands. She thought about leaving the next day, returning home to Tennessee, but she also thought about what Elvis had said to her before she walked off the stage. "You just gave me the best gift a man could get." Those words comforted her more than he would ever know. That night had connected two lives that couldn't have been more different, a global superstar and a grieving young woman. Yet for a few moments, they had shared something real, something human. Elvis talked about it quietly with his team the next day. "She wasn't just crying over a song," he said softly. "She was fighting through something." One of his crew nodded. "You really touched her, boss." Elvis smiled faintly and replied, "No, son, I think she touched me." From then on, his performances changed. Fans began to notice it. His voice carried a deeper emotion. His eyes often glistened mid-song. When he sang "If I Can Dream" or "Always on My Mind," there was a different kind of weight behind every word. Her confession on that stage had not only freed her from the pain she carried, it had reminded Elvis of the very reason he sang in the first place. It was never just about fame. It was never just about music. It was about reaching the hearts that needed it most. And on that unforgettable night, both Sarah and Elvis learned that sometimes the right words, spoken from the heart, can change two lives forever. The King's Silent Tears. The concert that night had ended hours ago, yet the image of Sarah, the girl in blue, still lingered in Elvis's mind. He sat alone in his dressing room, the noise of the crowd replaced by a heavy silence. His white jumpsuit was still half-buttoned, his guitar resting against the wall, but his thoughts were far from the glitz of Las Vegas. He kept replaying her words, "Your music saved me." They echoed in his heart like a song that refused to fade. For years, Elvis had performed to millions. He had seen faces light up, heard endless applause, and received countless letters from fans. But this felt different. Sarah's words weren't about fame. They were about life, pain, and survival. And for the first time in a long while, Elvis felt something stir deep within, a reminder of the man he used to be before the crown, before the pressure, before the king. The more he thought about that girl, the heavier his chest felt. There was a time when he sang because he loved it, because music was his escape, but somewhere along the way it had become an obligation, a show. Sarah's tears, her trembling voice had brought back the truth he had forgotten. Music had power. It could heal. It could save. He blinked hard, but the moisture in his eyes wouldn't go away. He wasn't the type to cry easily, not in front of others, but tonight was different. He had seen thousands of fans scream for him, but that single voice whispering thank you had broken him in the gentlest way. There was a quiet knock on the door. It was Charlie Hodge, his friend and bandmate. Charlie stepped inside, his voice low. "That girl tonight, she really got to you, huh?" Elvis didn't answer right away. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, she did. You could feel her pain. It was real." Charlie smiled faintly. "You gave her something special, man. You made her believe again." Elvis looked away, his voice soft. "She gave me something too, Charlie. She reminded me why I started singing." That was all he said. Charlie gave a small nod and left him alone again. Elvis sat back, took a deep breath, and let the tears finally come. Not the loud kind, just quiet ones, sliding down his face as he thought about everything that moment meant. It wasn't sadness exactly, it was something purer, a mix of gratitude, humility, and heartbreak all at once. The next night, when Elvis returned to the stage, he was different. The same lights, the same songs, but his voice carried a deeper emotion. When he sang "You'll Never Walk Alone," there was a weight in his tone that made the audience still. Those who were there swore they saw tears glisten in his eyes under the spotlight. And near the middle of the set, during a pause, Elvis spoke softly into the microphone. "You know," he began, scanning the faces in the crowd, "sometimes we forget what music can do. We think it's just songs and rhythm, but sometimes it's more than that. It's life itself." The crowd listened in silence. No one cheered, no one moved. They could feel that he was speaking from his heart. He smiled faintly, his voice catching just a little. "Last night, someone reminded me of that, and I just want to say thank you." He didn't mention her name. He didn't need to. The audience felt the emotion in his voice, saw the shimmer in his eyes, and knew something beautiful had happened. Something private, something real. Then the music began again. Elvis closed his eyes and let the song carry him. His voice cracked slightly on one note, and for once he didn't try to hide it. That crack made it human, made it true. Backstage later, his crew noticed how quiet he was. He wasn't his usual playful self. He sat with his guitar, gently strumming chords without words. When someone asked if he was okay, he simply smiled and said, "Yeah, just thinking about life." Meanwhile, in a small motel across town, Sarah watched the late-night news replay of the concert. They showed a clip of Elvis wiping his eyes during his performance, his voice filled with emotion. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears forming again, this time tears of peace. She realized that maybe her words had done for him what his songs had done for her. That night, two hearts, one on stage and one in the crowd, had found healing in the same music. And though Elvis rarely spoke of it again, those who knew him best noticed the change. From that day forward, every time he sang about love or loss, there was a quiet honesty in his tone, as if he was remembering that moment when a stranger's truth reached his soul. That night, the king didn't just perform. He felt, and the tears he shed on stage weren't a sign of weakness. They were proof that beneath the fame and legend, Elvis Presley still had the heart of a man who cared deeply, and who never forgot the girl in blue who reminded him what it meant to sing from the soul. after the show. When the final applause faded and the bright stage lights dimmed, Elvis walked quietly off stage. The cheers still echoed through the hall, but his mind wasn't on the music anymore. He kept thinking about Sarah, the quiet girl in the blue dress, the one whose trembling voice had broken through all the noise. Back in his dressing room, he sat on the edge of the couch, towel around his neck, sweat still running down his face. The laughter and chatter of his crew filled the hallway, but he barely heard them. He reached for his water, took a sip, and stared at the floor. That moment on stage kept replaying in his mind. Her eyes, her tears, her words. "Your music saved me." He couldn't let it go. Elvis turned to his manager, still standing near the door. "Can you find out who that girl was?" he asked softly. "The one from the crowd tonight?" His manager looked surprised. "You mean the one you called up on stage?" Elvis nodded. "Yeah, I want to know if she's okay." Later that night, when the hotel was quiet, Elvis picked up a pen and a notepad from the desk. He didn't know what he was going to write, just that he needed to. The words came slowly, but they came from the heart. "Dear Sarah, you reminded me tonight what music is truly for. You made me feel something real again. I hope you find peace in every song you hear, just like you gave peace to me. Thank you for sharing your story, Elvis." He folded the note, sealed it, and set it aside, hoping it would reach her somehow. A few days later, one of his team members found a name in the ticket records, Sarah M. from Tennessee. Elvis smiled when he heard it. "Send her that note," he said, "and a little something from me." He picked up one of his favorite guitars, a small sunburst Gibson he used for rehearsals. On the back, he wrote in black ink, "To Sarah, keep singing through the pain. Love, Elvis." The guitar and the letter were quietly shipped out. No press, no attention. Just a private act of gratitude from a man who understood that some moments were too sacred for headlines. Weeks passed. Elvis went on with his tour, city after city, but that night in Las Vegas stayed with him. His performances changed, softer, deeper. When he sang songs about love and loss, people could feel the sincerity in his voice. Something in him had opened up, and everyone around him could see it. For Sarah, the package arrived one morning with no warning. When she opened it and saw the letter, her hands shook. The words made her cry, but not from sadness. It was the feeling of being seen, of being understood. She touched the guitar gently, as if it were made of light. It wasn't just a gift. It was proof that the moment they shared had been real, that even for a man like Elvis Presley, her story had mattered. From that night forward, both of them carried that memory quietly. Two hearts, forever linked by a song. The memory that lived on. Years passed, but that night in Las Vegas never faded. Fans still talked about it. The moment when Elvis stopped his show, called a young woman on stage, and ended up in tears. For those who were there, it wasn't just another concert. It was something they carried in their hearts, like a story too human to forget. Reporters mentioned it briefly in newspapers, calling it a touching exchange between the king and a fan. But the cameras hadn't captured everything. They didn't see the look in his eyes or the way her voice shook when she said thank you. What really happened that night belonged only to the two of them. Elvis never spoke much about it publicly, but those close to him said he changed after that evening. He became quieter off stage, more reflective. His music carried more emotion, not the kind that came from performance, but from truth. When he sang, people could feel something different, as if he wasn't just performing to them, but with them. Sometimes before a show, he would pause, look out over the empty seats, and whisper, "For the ones who need it most." No one else knew what he meant, but his band understood. He was thinking about Sarah. Meanwhile, back in Tennessee, Sarah lived a quiet life. She kept the guitar safe, polished and untouched, sitting in a small corner of her living room. Sometimes she'd run her fingers across the signature on the back, "Keep singing through the pain." Those words became her reminder on hard days. She didn't seek attention or interviews. When people asked about that night, she'd just smile softly and say, "He was kind." That was all she needed to say. The rest of the story was between her and the man whose songs had saved her life. Years later, when Elvis passed away, Sarah cried like she had lost an old friend. She placed flowers beneath a framed photo of him, taken that same year in Las Vegas. The world mourned him loudly. Crowds, headlines, songs on every radio, but her grief was quiet, personal. She whispered, "Thank you," the same way she had on stage years before. Time moved on, but that memory lived on too. Fans shared the story across generations, a legend told in small corners of Elvis fan clubs, in letters, and in late-night conversations between people who still believed in moments of grace. And every once in a while someone would find the old photo, Elvis kneeling beside a tearful girl in blue, his hand on her shoulder, his face gentle and wet with tears. The image said everything words never could. For Elvis, it was never about fame that night. For Sarah, it was never about being noticed. It was about a spark of humanity, two souls connecting through music, grief, and gratitude. That night became more than a story. It became a reminder of who Elvis truly was, not just the king of rock and roll, but a man with a heart big enough to feel every word he sang. And for Sarah, even decades later, whenever she heard his voice on the radio, she smiled through the tears, because she knew she had once seen the real Elvis Presley, the king with a heart. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.